Hello and welcome back to another video. From the title and the thumbnail, you already know I'm going to be discussing the Voynich Manuscript, often called the most mysterious book ever written, and with good reason. There's a very good chance you probably already know all about this manuscript, or at least heard about it. It's quite notorious. But if you haven't, or even if you have, I thought, this is a facsimile reproduction. I thought it would be fun to flip through and kind of tell you about it. Not at great length, I'm not qualified at all to do a full analysis on it, but I just thought it might be a little bit fun to kind of flip through it, have a look, and I can just tell you some basic information about it. But yeah, it's this edition, as I said, is a facsimile reproduction published by Yale University. It's a hardcover, and it's quite large, which is really nice. It has this cool dust jacket. See if I can take it off without it being too loud. It is quite crinkly. And then on the cover, you can see it has some images from some of the pages on it. And the dust jacket is, I don't really know. It's like a plastic, really. It's kind of has like a wax paper feel to it, or like not wax paper, like a parchment paper, I would say. But you can see that there is this text taken right from the book, and it's somewhat translucent. So it's quite nice, and it is very crinkly because this has been sitting on my coffee table, and some guests actually put their drink on it, so the condensation from the drink kind of warped it a little bit. It was a very... I was trying to be polite, but I was like freaking out when I saw it, but it's fine, it's not a big deal. That's why we have these dust jackets anyway, but I digress. The Voynich Manuscript is... it's an early 15th century, it's like early 1400s manuscript written in an unknown script. It's a cipher that has yet to be cracked to this very day. And the text, like this text is like, oh my goodness, hang on, I'm so sorry. And the text on the cover, as you can see here, this is referred to as Voynichese, just because we don't know what it is. But yeah, it's believed to have been created in northern Italy during the Renaissance. So here is, looking at the table of contents here, we have like an introduction and a preface, and then the actual facsimile of the pages of the manuscript, and then it ends off with some essays just kind of talking about the history, theories, and some brief information. And then there is some notes and an index in the back. So it's a very nice book to really go through it. You can really sink your teeth into it. But here, I'm going to show you this. So this book, the manuscript had a letter. So I might discuss this when we get into the history of it, just because it has a very long, convoluted, and mysterious history, which we can get into. I'm just going to skip through the introduction and the preface. And here is the front cover of the manuscript. So what I like about this book is that it is a facsimile reproduction, true to form. So they took they took images of the front cover, the back cover, the spine on all four sides. So you really get a good feel or sense of what the book looks like in its true form. So we have Yale put its library branding in the front cover there. So this is, I'm going to move this candle out of the way 1 second here. Kind of a bad glare. I don't know if that's any better, actually. But here we have the first page. So if I zoom in here, you can see the actual text, this Voynich here. But the history of the book, let's get into that. So, a lot of the manuscript's history is unknown. It was first confirmed, the first confirmed owner was a man by the name of George Baresh, and he was a 17th century alchemist from Prague. And upon his death, the manuscript passed to his friend, Jan Marek Marcy, who was the rector of Charles University in Prague. And Marcy sent the book to his friend, Athanasius Kircher, and he was a German Jesuit scholar and polymath, to see if he could, at the time, if anybody could unlock the mystery behind the manuscript, it would be Kircher, but he wasn't able to do it, and no records of the book were found for the next, 200 some odd years, until the troops of Victor Emmanuel II took over the city, or took over Rome, not the city. Well, I guess Rome is the city, but I was trying to be more specific. Took over Rome and annexed the Papal States. So the book was likely held in the Pontifical Gregorian University. So Emmanuel II took over Rome in 1870, confiscating many of the churches and the church properties. And the Jesuits at the time were only allowed to keep personal items. Everything else belonged to the new government. So the Jesuits decided to hide some of the library's most valuable items, stash them away in secret and secure places, including a number of manuscripts and Kircher's correspondences, which is believed to have been where the manuscript was, just laying dormant in a pile of documents. But nevertheless, manuscripts managed to escape confiscation and remained in possession of the Jesuits until 1903, when they decided to sell a collection of some 300 to 400 manuscripts to the Vatican Library. And this sale, for whatever reason, took 9 years to complete. Not sure why, but in the end, Wilfrid Voynich, under terms of absolute secrecy, was able to acquire a small number of these books, manuscripts, that were about to enter the Vatican Library. And one of these manuscripts happens to be the Voynich Manuscript, how it got its namesake, really. And he owned the manuscript until his death in 1930, but he left it to his wife, Ethel. And in 1960, Ethel passed away, but she left it to her friend, Anne M. Nill. And I'm going to go back to the front cover here, because she left a letter. It says here, zoom in here, 1 second. Concerning the cipher manuscript, not to be opened until after my death, and then only by A.M. Nill or one other responsible person in place of her. So that's on the envelope. And then the actual letter here kind of details her history, or the manuscript's history, as it was told to her by her husband, Wilfrid. So, the cipher manuscript was bought with other manuscripts by Wilfrid M. Voynich in or about 1911. It was the property of the Vatican and was in a castle at Frascati. The intermediary through whom he approached the Vatican authorities was an English Jesuit Father Joseph Strickland, who had, I believe, some connection with Malta. Father Strickland, who has since died, knew the sale of certain manuscripts had been decided upon if a buyer could be found whose discretion could be trusted. Whether this secrecy was because of the strained relations with the Quirinal, or I do not know. Father Strickland gave his personal assurance that Wilfred M. Voynich could be trusted, and that on that assurance, allowed to buy after giving a promise of secrecy, he told me that at the time, in confidence, feeling that someone should know in case of his death. For the same reason, I am leaving the statement in the safe in case of my death. Ethel L. Voynich, July 19th, 1930. So, very secret transaction between Wilfred and his Jesuit father, Strickland. This book was promised to the Vatican, and yet he somehow ended up with it, which would kind of make you think that it was a fraud. However, testing and carbon dating has been done and proved that it did come from the early 14th century. So, Ethel left it to her friend Anne Nill, who was a longtime friend of Ethel's and Wilfred's. Then they worked in Wilfred's bookshop as an assistant. And in 1961, Anne sells it to H.P. Krauss, who was a rare book dealer. And in 1969, Krauss gives the book to Yale University, and that is how it came into Yale. So that's kind of the history of the book patched together. And yeah, as you can see, it's full of these depictions of botanicals, this strange text that nobody has been able to crack. And it leaves you wondering why. And, well, for starters, it's a very complicated encoding system. With the German Enigma machine, that was a very difficult cipher, but because they knew that it was in German, it made it slightly easier to break because the language was known. But with this, we're dealing with an unknown script, an alphabet. It's a unique document. There's no other document like this that exists. And the cipher is just, it's unclear. So there's two different types of ciphers. There's substitution ciphers, which just, replace symbols and substitute letters. And then there's a transposition cipher, and that's, when you mix up and change the letter sequence. And, we don't know what Voynich is. Is it a simple substitution, or is it a substitution combined with transposition? And it's just, you just don't know. You don't know. There are lots of people who claim that it's a forgery or a hoax, but, this would have cost an astronomical amount of money back in the day to produce. Books were something that only wealthy could afford. I did a little bit of reading to just kind of give myself a rough idea of what something like this would have cost. And while it's basically impossible to know, I can only speculate roughly. And I found an article in my research, the cost of doing scribal business and prices of manuscripts and books in England from 1300 to 1483, and I'll put a link to this article below so that I'm not just making stuff up over here. But basically, books were produced very differently, obviously, from how they're produced now. So back in the day, you would have to go to a parchment maker to make the parchment, and then you would have to take the parchment to a scribe who would write everything out, and then if you wanted artwork done, then you would take the scribed parchment to the artist who would do the reproductions, and then you have to take it to a bookbinder to put everything together. And it was just, there were a lot of hands involved, and each hand, every person involved would collect a fee. So I found in this article I read, there was a description for a manuscript in 1288. A Norwich cathedral paid 17 shillings and 5 pence for 144 sheets of vellum. So 144 sheets of vellum. This manuscript is around 240. However, they probably more pages because there's some evidence suggesting that some pages are missing. So, you know, we'll say 240 pages. That's 106 pages. This book is 106 pages more than that. And that was 17 shillings 5 pence. Just for the vellum. And the scribes writing that book were paid 20 shillings 5 pence. And the average daily wage for a working man, like a carpenter at the time, was 3 pence a day. So, to put that in perspective in today's money, 17 shillings 5 pence works out to be about $1,034 just for the vellum. 20 shillings 5 pence works out to be about $1,200 for the scribe, which brings the total to $2,246. And 3 pence a day works out to be about $14, $15 a day's wage. So like that's like to make a book for 144 pages in 1288 would cost like 6 months wages. Like, it's just insane to think about it. So, you know, add 100 more pages to that, you can kind of get a sense that this book was expensive to produce. So if it's fake, like, why would you waste all that money and effort to create something that was just a joke? I don't know, just why it's the most mysterious book ever written. Not only that, there are, this book has been analyzed frontwards, backwards, cover to cover, just, you know, it's been analyzed to death, and statistical properties indicate that there is a real language that's being encoded. It's not just gibberish. So of the 170,000 odd characters, put that into 35,000 words, 8,114 of those words are considered unique word types, whose structure follows a phonological or orthographic laws of some sort. You know, like certain characters must appear in each word, like English vowels, for instance, or some characters never follow others, or some may be doubled or tripled, but others may not. And also the distribution of the characters within the words is particular. You know, some letters are only occurring at the beginning of a word, and some only at the end, and some are always in the middle. So, you know, there's these patterns that you see that indicate that it is a language of some sort. It's not just, you know, gobbledygook. You know, and some words also only occur in certain sections or a few pages, and others occur throughout the text or manuscript. So it's very interesting. And a man by the name of Diego Mencino published a study where he used statistical methods to analyze and search for connections and clusters, and he was able to create a 3D model of the text structure and word frequencies. And basically his findings concluded that 90% of the cases, the Voynich systems are similar to other known books. So basically that means that the text is an actual language. And as I said before, you know, there's been carbon dating and chemical analysis proving it was made in the early 15th century. And it was written with quill pen and iron gall ink. And though the paints, like the greens and the blues and all the colors that you see here, they may have been applied at a later date. But the paints in the manuscript were made of materials that were, you know, expected from that time. In medieval Europe, blue is, you know, ground azurite, white is egg whites and calcium carbonate, red, brown that you see here is, you know, like red ochre, and you know, paints were deemed inexpensive. But there's also indications of retouching happening. So, I believe actually, it's on the first or second page. Bear with me here 1 second. Show you what I'm talking about. Right here. So, just going to bring you in for a closer look. The camera will focus. There we go. Okay, so 1 second. You see here, you can see how the text is a little bit lighter in some spots, but then you have these darker areas. they indicate, these darker spots indicate that somebody has gone over this, which is interesting. But you can see this throughout the text. This is just one page example here. And you can see how crudely done the artwork is. It's not very precise at all. Yeah. But yeah, it's so yes, that is very interesting, I would say. But yeah, in terms of cryptographic attempts, the first attempt was completed by a man named William Newbold in 1921, and he was a philosopher of sorts. And he theorized that the visible text that you see here, it was meaningless, but that each apparent letter was constructed out of a series of tiny little markings that were only discernible under magnification. And these markings apparently were supposed to be based on ancient Greek shorthand, which, whatever, I don't know how he got that, but anyways, it was basically, it formed a second level of script, and that second level held the real content of the writing. But a man by the name of John Matthews Manley, who was an English professor, wrote a absolutely scathing review discrediting Newbold's theory and, punching holes in it. Basically, he just stated that it was affirmed pareidolia, and Newbold was only really seeing what he wanted to see, and that these markings were nothing more than how the ink dried on the paper. So basically left Newbold's theory in tatters, to say the least. And many other academics and scholars and cryptographers have examined the manuscript and presented a variety of theories. However, none of them have really stuck or proved to be, a concrete translation. Even William F. Friedman, who at the time was known as the world's greatest cryptologist, worked as a cryptographer for the U.S. government, actually. He was introduced to the Voynich Manuscript via Mr. Manley. And, Friedman formed 2 study groups along with his wife, Elizabeth, and basically they just determined that trying to decipher this manuscript was an exercise in futility. In 1954 was when they were examining it, and they basically took each line of the manuscript as it was transcribed and put it into an IBM punch card to make it machine readable, and they still couldn't figure it out. But they basically just stated that it was likely not a cipher at all. It was just mumbo jumbo. But another interesting attempt, more recent attempt that I found quite fascinating, was done by Greg Kondrak, who is a professor at the University of Alberta. He teaches artificial intelligence and natural language processing. He is a computational linguist, which is just a fancy way of saying that he makes computers understand human language. And what he did was he took a sample of 400 languages and assigned a probability of each language to Voyniches to determine the language with the highest probability, and his findings suggest that it was Hebrew. There's a lot of similarities shared with Hebrew. Hebrew, for instance, doesn't contain vowels, so that naturally makes the words shorter. And if you look at the text here, you can see there aren't really a lot of long words. It's just 4, 5, 6 characters, really. So that's a very interesting finding. But yeah, basically their article was published in 2017, I believe. Just saying that the language was most likely Hebrew, but encoded using alphagrams, which are alphabetically encoded anagrams. So just that would make sense, I guess. But that was his findings using AI. So very interesting stuff. But I mean, even if we could figure out the language, like, I don't know, like if it's an alphabetically encoded anagram, as Kondrac's study suggests, that would make, I feel like that would be just impossible to decode. I mean, hang on a second here, like, let me get a piece of paper. So I have a piece of paper here. So just to give you an example of how difficult this cipher could be. So if we have, I don't know, we'll say mountain, okay? Mountain. If we take out the vowels, we're left with MNTN. Now if we arrange these alphabetically, we get MNNT for mountain, which you would just never guess that would be mountain just from looking at it, right? You're like, another example, hopeful. Arrange it alphabetically. Never would guess that that's hopeful. So you can see how quickly the level of difficulty just kind of takes off. I mean, the ciphers are no joke. This is just a small little example about how complicated they can be, you know. So if that's done in Hebrew, like, jeez, who knows? It's just, I think it's interesting. I mean, like, it's naturally understandable about why it hasn't been solved yet, even with AI. I mean, personally, from somebody who is not qualified in any way to make informed hypotheses about this, I don't know, I don't think we'll ever crack the code. You know, the text is encoded in a language. I do believe that it's either constructed like a fake language or it's a known language. But I do find Greg Kondrac's findings very, very interesting. And I also think that the text is alchemical in nature. I really do. There's actually an essay about why, in the back of the book, about why it's not alchemical, but I would disagree from my just personal opinion and intuition. I do think it's alchemical in nature. I think maybe it was written by a single person. I'm gonna take the camera off the tripod 1 second here. There, that's better. I wanted to give you a better look up close. There. But you know, it could be done by a single person. The writing is very uniform, and here's the thing about the writing, okay? You can see here there's like no mistakes. So if you're writing something out like this, usually, like, even like, you know, taking notes in school, or just, you know, your brain gets working ahead of your hands, or you make a mistake and you scratch it out, but you don't see that here, really. So what does that tell you? Well, I don't know what it tells you, but, you know, maybe it was being copied. There was like a source text and it was being copied, or, you know, maybe there was just such a high degree of concentration required because they're writing in a cipher that that they had to pay attention so they didn't make mistakes. But these illustrations, you know, they're very crude and they don't really depict any known plant life or any known anyway, but that just could just be because they're not to bash the artist, but they're not that great, really. I mean, in comparison to other manuscripts of the same period, you know, they're very elaborate and intricate and very well done, but these are just kind of a little rough around the edges, which could indicate that it was written by a single person. It didn't go to an artist. Which kind of lends itself to, you know, it being a forgery. Especially since there's no other text like it. It's really a one-off. I like that there's these fold-outs, like the manuscript is just very interesting. See, and there's these, it's almost like there's these like cosmological drawings, and I don't know, it's interesting, and women in baths with green water, and you know, you really didn't see this stuff at the time. Oops. But see these things here? These look like, to me, these look like apothecary jars, and these are like roots, which, you know, kind of lends itself to being alchemical. You know, with the poor representation of these botanical drawings, you know, it could be due to lack of artistic skill, or, you know, perhaps the botanical drawings are, like, I mean, not just the botanical drawings, but like all the drawings in general. It's fascinating. Literally, you could just spend hours just pouring through it. What does it mean? Oh, I don't know what was I saying? Oh yeah, like the drawings and stuff, you know, they could just be emblematic. They don't have to be, you know, true to form, like renderings. You know, it was very common in alchemical texts, magical texts like grimoires, to have you know, these illustrations are not, you know, literal copies. They're just emblematic interpretations, really. I did oh jeez, I forget what it was called now. It was, oh, it'll come to me one second. It was the, oh man, I'm gonna have to look it up. Oh, the Liber Floridus, I think. I'll have to add it in post, but it was basically this like encyclopedic compendium depicting these trees. I think there was like, I don't know, like a dozen or maybe half a dozen of these trees that were not like real trees. They were signifying the ranks of happiness, and you know, that's what could be what these botanical illustrations are depicting. They're representational. But yeah, it's just so fascinating, and I am just, you know, I'm not a linguist, and I'm just, in comparison to the people that have looked at this, I'm just so intellectually impaired. I'm in no way equipped to provide any real analysis. It's all just, my own personal speculation from someone who is curious about such things. But yeah, I don't believe it'll ever be solved. Maybe one day, if with AI advancements, like, if we can figure out a way how to teach AI every single language known to man, and then also be able to comprehend and predict possible linguistic patterns within the languages, then maybe, but I don't know, it seems like it's like way out there, because AI is, well, it's great, but you literally have to teach AI. You have to tell it exactly what to do, because stupid computers are dumb. But I don't know, it's either basically it's either the most sophisticated cipher known to man, or it's a scam by someone who had the means to reproduce it. But there's been so many people that have looked over this thing for years and years and never been able to figure it out. Kind of makes you wonder if it is actually a fraud in the end. It's like some sort of like medieval terms and conditions. I don't know. It's fascinating, and the fact that it was going to end up that the Vatican was going to buy it. Yeah, I mean, that's quite puzzling, They deemed it worthy of purchasing. So maybe there is some legit information behind it. Who knows? The Vatican has stolen so many books. So much information. Who freaking knows what they have stored in their restricted section. I'll tell you what, if I ever had an invisibility cloak, I would be taking some snacks and a sleeping bag, and I'd just be camping out there. But that's basically it. That is the book. You can see here, this is the back cover. And the book from the bottom, side view. And the top, side view. And the spine facing out and in. Yeah, it's a fascinating book. There's just so much you can read up on it. This was a very just kind of casual conversation about it. Felt like I rambled a lot. But yeah, the Voynich Manuscript, I highly would recommend, if you're interested in this, pick yourself up a copy, because you literally can just spend hours and hours just flipping through it and wondering, puzzling over it, and trying to make sense of it. But it is fascinating, and I love these types of mysteries, riddles, and enigmas. It's right up my alley. So, but yeah, that's basically all I can really say about it. Hopefully this video wasn't too boring. If you've made it this far, thank you so much. As always, I appreciate you, and hopefully I'll be able to put out more videos more consistently. I'll do my best. I can't make any promises, but thank you for watching so much, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.